Perfect. And just for a little background information for individuals who are not aware of Black Girls Politicking, maybe this is your first time encountering us, maybe this is your first time on an event like this. Black Girls Politicking was founded in 2020. It was founded directly after Madam Vice President took office as a means of celebrating and really just looking at the accomplishments of Black women across the board. And so tonight, of course, is no different. The work that we do is always about amplification, empowerment, and inspiring the next generation of public servants. And tonight we are joined by none other than Judge Katherine Thomas, my fellow Bison. She's also a Spelman woman. She's also a member of my sorority, a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated as well. And so, if you guys do not know who Judge Katherine is, maybe you're not familiar with her story. Judge Katherine Thomas is a historic figure, not just in Harris County, but in Texas and in this nation. She became the youngest district court judge. And someone actually tried to argue with me about that today in the comments. And I was like, no, I do my research. She became the youngest district court judge in the state's history at just 30 years old, which is incredible. So please clap for that. That is just a monumental accomplishment. She was sworn into the 184th District Court, and she is the first woman of color to hold this position. And her focus has honestly been on fairness and youth rehabilitation. So, just some key details, if that's not enough, right? If that's not enough, some key details about Judge Katherine Thomas. She is a graduate of Spelman College, like I said before, and Howard University School of Law, also known as Hustle. She is a former employee of the district attorney's office, and her goals are very simple. She aims to create a youth resource program, which she has done, and uphold a fair and impartial justice system. She is incredible, and I'm so excited to welcome you, Judge Katherine, to the table. As we talk, of course, you will be able to share more of your milestones, more of your accomplishments. But as we welcome Judge Thomas, I want everyone to give her a warm welcome wherever you're watching from. And Judge Katherine, I'll hand it over to you to just introduce yourself and get familiar with the audience and allow us to learn more about you.
Well, thank you, Michaela. What a warm and inviting welcome. Thank you for this platform. Thank you for Black Girl Politicking. It is a safe space, I know, for me. And so I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Katherine Thomas. I'm a native Houstonian, born and raised in Houston. Like Michaela said, I knew that I wanted to be a Spelman woman because my sister went to Spelman. And then the first lawyer I knew was my sister, and I followed in her footsteps. She ended up going to law school in New Orleans, but I wanted to be a social engineer at Howard University School of Law, where we were inspired by Charles Hamilton Houston. And in his words, a lawyer is either a parasite on society or a social engineer. And so I knew that I wanted to make a meaningful difference in my community. And so I came back to Houston. I knew I wanted to be in Houston. And I got an internship at the district attorney's office. And what that internship taught me is that there were many people who looked like me who were victims of crime, and that there was a space for me as a prosecutor. It was a job that I really, really loved. I felt very passionate about the work that I was doing, but I knew that it wasn't what I was going to do in the long run. Like many of you, I had a plan for my life, and I thought that I would be at the district attorney's office, and then I would go on to be an assistant U.S. attorney. And then I thought that I would do criminal defense. And I kind of was at a crossroads when I was at the DA's office, and I knew that I wanted to transition into something else. And I was talking to a mentor, and I had been applying to other jobs, some civil litigation firms, and nothing was panning out. And I didn't feel passionate about it. I just knew that I didn't want to be at the district attorney's office anymore. And so my mentor said, well, don't you want to be a judge? This is something that we had spoken about because he's a judge. And I said, yeah, but that's something that I'll later pursue down the line. And he said, why? And I said, well, because I have to pay my dues. They're just, I'm not ready to be a judge. At that time, I was only 29 years old. And so he said, age does not equal experience. And it's something that always sticks with me as I talk to people who are younger than me, especially in this climate where we see young people having the courage to run for office. And it stuck with me. And I remember he told me, I'm giving you 24 hours to decide. And I was just thinking, okay, well, he's obviously joking because there's no way I could make such an important decision that soon. But I prayed about it. I talked to some mentors, my family about it, and I decided to do it. I had peace about it. And it was the hardest decision that I ever made. I even kind of get chills thinking about it now, but it was the right decision. There was even a constitutional amendment that was passed after I took office that changed the number of years that you had to practice before you are able to run for office. So what that means is that unless the Constitution changes again, is that I will always be the youngest judge in Texas. And so I knew that it was exactly where I was supposed to be. And just because it was hard does not mean that it wasn't where I was supposed to be. And so it was very difficult running for office. Is why I applaud anyone who decides to run, irrespective of the results, because it is extremely hard to put yourself out there every day and ask people to support your campaign. And I was successful in both elections, in the primary and the general. So I say all that to say God has been exceptionally good to me. I feel very blessed to be in this role. I feel very blessed to have a story to be able to tell other people, other Black women, other young adults who want to be future leaders. So I am excited to be here, and I just wanted to thank you, Michaela. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, you said a lot. You said a lot of incredible things. If you guys didn't catch some of that, of course, you can always rewatch the playback. But Judge Catherine, I want to go back a little bit. So we know you won, we know you ran. What is the lead up to going to law school, right? There are so many individuals who have this dream, right? They're like, one day I'm going to be a lawyer. That's the card that they have sort of handed themselves, right? That's the plan that they've made. What is
Mhm.
the lead up to go to law school? What is the decision where you're like, this is why I'm going to law school, this is how I'm going to law school? Tell us all about that as well.
Absolutely. My mother has a school project that I completed when I was 4 years old. And on the school project, it was the what do you want to do when you grow up theme. And I wrote a judge. Now, I had never seen a judge before in my life, to my knowledge. But she actually sometimes sends me pictures of it just to show that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. But ended up going to Spelman, and Spelman is not a place where mediocrity is tolerated. The standard is excellence, as you can imagine, being at Howard. And so I knew as a political science major that law school was the trajectory. And so everyone around me, and it shows me the importance of um, our village and who we surround ourselves with, because there was never really an option. And so I think about sometimes people who are in my courtroom who have only seen certain things, whether it's been people who have never graduated from high school. That is kind of the standard. And so what the standard was at Spelman was excellence, not just Black excellence, but excellence. And we just happen to be Black, and we just happen to be Black women. And so I knew as a political science major that law school was going to be in my future. And so junior year, I started studying for the LSAT, the entrance exam. And I remember thinking, well, this score is certainly not going to be high enough to get into any law school, but I continued to trust God, took the LSAT again, and I applied to several law schools, and I ended up choosing Howard because I realized the importance of being a graduate of an HBCU. And my education at Spelman is fantastic, right? But it was all of the pluses that I gained from being at Spelman. It was the fact that I learned about the diaspora. It was the fact that I had developed community. It was the fact that I had resources through my network so that whenever I am in a different city, I can reach out to that network. It was all of those things that mattered to me moving forward with my law school degree. And so I applied to Howard. Howard gave me money, and I said, I am going to DC. And it was really a culture shock because I really think I was too young to be in law school. I really could have waited, honestly, another few years. But um, it was a really life-changing decision because being in a graduate school causes you to grow up very quickly. There are no more handouts. Like if there's no more people who can tell you, well, this was on the exam. You know how we know how to finesse at a HBCU. There's none of that. Either either you do the work or you're out because you're on a curve. And if you curve out, that's it. And so it was an opportunity for me to really learn who I was as a young woman, but really learn what I wanted to do in terms of my practice area.
Yeah, and you spoke to something about being at a HBCU. So for undergrad, I went to a PWI. For my master's, I went to Howard. And for me, it was also such a culture shock that they expected such a level of excellence. I remember being at new student orientation and them telling us, look to your left, look to your right. By the time you finish this program, they may not be there and thinking, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is this? Like, what does this mean? But the level of excellence that they expect from you. And I think honestly, it's beautiful because you carry it with you throughout the rest of your life. Like, once you learn to, to operate at such a level, it's really hard to backtrack. So I love that you spoke to that. One thing that we, all know is that you've seen the justice system up close in a variety of roles, right? You've gone from being a law student to now being a judge. What does that journey look like in between, right? So a lot of people think, and you spoke to this earlier, judges are typically older, they're wiser, they're these individuals that, we hold reverence for. What does it look like to go from being, a law student and then going on this journey to becoming a full-time judge?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I really carry with me because I think about that when I'm on the bench in terms of my decision making sometimes. And I ask myself, how would I feel if I was a lawyer and the judge made this decision or the judge told me this? And so I try to always be mindful of the people who are standing in front of me. So what it looks like is, so when I was at the district attorney's office, as I said before, I fell in love with the job, but there was a point where I became very disheartened by what I was observing. And when I say what I was observing, it was the criminal justice system as a whole. I was sad about the people who I was practicing in front of, who I didn't think took the law seriously. I was sad about some of the things that they said. I mean, I practiced in front of a judge when I was in misdemeanor court that was still calling people who look like me boy and girl. And so there's things that I had observed that really showed me that there are a lot of deficiencies in the system. And if I could just be a part of this and make some changes, the system will be better for it. And so I'm often mindful of how I regard not even defendants, but even litigants, people who practice in my court, because one of the things that it doesn't take any sort of formal education to receive is just respect and kindness. And that's what I told my court staff when I first took the bench, said, if you are having a bad day, please do not show up to work because people are facing the most vulnerable moments of their life. And the last thing they need is somebody with an attitude when they're just asking a simple question or they don't understand anything. And so the standard in my courtroom is respect and kindness. Now, does that mean that we don't make difficult decisions? That's not true. Sometimes people have to go to prison. Sometimes justice looks like your case getting dismissed or you being placed on a pretrial intervention or probation. But that journey in between is really what I'm oftentimes mindful of and really at the forefront of my mind when I make certain decisions. And yes, it's the journey in law school and practicing, but it's also sometimes like those lived experiences where you are pulled over by the police and you know how it felt, or you were oftentimes prejudged and you know how it felt. And so I try to be mindful of those experiences and also making sure that I'm listening because sometimes you can presume that you know the answer to something and somebody says something and you're like, okay, well, I hadn't considered that. And maybe you are right, but just taking that additional time to listen and to reflect oftentimes is the difference in people's experiences in different courts. And so I always want to be someone who is mindful, who listens, who's thoughtful, and who's fair.
That's nice to know because honestly, you never know what people are genuinely going through, right? Like, you don't know what it takes, not only to get there, but to be in a courtroom, what that feels like, what they're dealing with at home, what they're bringing with them. So I love that you talked about that a little bit. And so, with that being said, we've also seen something really cool from you. You're also a professor, you're working at an HBCU,
Yep.
you're working at Texas Southern State University or Texas Southern University. And I really want you to dive into what does that look like on both sides, right? Being both a professor and a judge. What is there that you've learned from your students? What is there that they're learning from you now that you're in this position?
Yeah, nobody ever asked me about that. Thanks for asking me about that, Michaela. I love teaching. Oftentimes when we're in jury selection and I'm talking to prospective jurors, they'll always ask me if I'm a teacher, and I don't ever see myself as a teacher, but I guess I am. Um, so I started teaching at Thurgood Marshall School of Law about 3 years ago. And I will say it has truly been the honor of my life because I get to have a firsthand seat in in the formative years of prospective attorneys. And so the standards that I see in the courtroom every day where I'm like, I don't like this. I try to always teach my students to be better. And my students have to wear suits to class because they are being trained to be lawyers and to be trial lawyers. So I teach a trial simulation course where they have to learn trial skills. And the first step in being an effective trial lawyer is just how you present yourself, making sure that you understand not only the rules of evidence, but just some of the soft skills that we take for granted. And so, being a teacher and also being in the courtroom allows me to impart my day-to-day experiences into my students. My students actually have to watch a trial from beginning to end as a part of one of their midterm assignments. And they came to the courtroom this week. They were there on Monday. And one of the things that they said was, Judge, wow, you're very serious when you get on the bench. And we don't get that side of you. And I told my student, I said, because one thing that my mentor, who's a federal judge, Al Bennett, told me is that you are dealing with people's lives and you do not have room to be on the bench being anything other than serious. And so that is always the demeanor that I carry. And so I want to be sure that people understand that this is not just a day at work for me. I take what I do extremely seriously because this is your life. And I think sometimes we can get jaded with the day to day and we forget that somebody is literally facing, because I'm in a criminal courtroom. Somebody is literally maybe sentenced to life in prison, maybe sentenced to life without parole. Even the death penalty is on the table. And so we're not talking about money, we're not talking about property, we are talking about life and liberty. And so the demeanor that I always want to carry is that I am serious. I take this serious because your life is serious. And I had a clerk who asked me for Halloween if she could dress in a costume. And I asked her, I said, now, how would it look if you're dressed as a cat and I'm sentencing a man to 75 years in prison? It's just we can't. We don't have those jobs. We don't have those jobs. And so the nature of this profession is serious. And so I just going back to your question, I know I've kind of gone off track, but um I love teaching because I love being able to impart my experiences in the courtroom and also some things I learned at Howard too, into my students. And so I want everyone who is a student of mine to be so impressive when they walk into the courtroom. I want them to say, man, that's a graduate of TMSL. I don't want the standard for HBCUs to be that they're less than, because I know that people think that. I want people to presume that you went to Harvard based off of how you carry yourself in the courtroom. And that's what I hope to impart in my students.
I love that. And I think also, how rare is it that you're taking a course from someone who is doing this work at the highest level, right? I went to school, both of my degrees are in political science. That does not mean that my professors were automatically political scientists, right?
Right.
Or even some of them didn't even work in that space. They learned it, and then they became professors themselves. So I can only imagine what that feels like to know not only am I learning from my professor or even another attorney, but I'm learning from someone that's doing this work at the highest level. And so, speaking at the highest level, we have seen remarkable drops in violent crime under your leadership. What decisions or philosophies do you think have made the biggest difference in the way those numbers have dropped?
Yeah, so we saw even the numbers, the mayor actually released some new statistics last month, and violent crime has dropped even more. I think 21% in aggravated assaults. It was maybe 17%, I think. And then aggravated robberies have dropped by 21%. And so I think what is happening is that people are realizing that some people are bad people. I don't even like saying that. But most people are just make a bad decision. And it's typically because they are met with desperation. And so what I realized when I talked about there being deficiencies in the criminal justice system is that nobody was actually addressing the root causes of why people kept returning to court. You expect people to go out after they are convicted or placed on probation and suddenly become different when you don't even address the reason why they came into the courtroom in the first place. And so um, I piloted this, what we call our emerging adult docket or EAD. And essentially, it is a space where we partner with different community agencies who are already doing the work. And so when I say already doing the work, they are helping people with housing, mentorship, drug and alcohol rehabilitation, career placement, mental health treatment. And so what we do is essentially engage these community partners with the courtroom. And the program is specifically for people between the ages of 17 to 25 because that's 82% of our jail population. So when we talk about violent crime, when we talk about crime as a whole, we have to address this population first. Um, and so when we address the root cause, we actually identify why people keep coming back into the system. And if they're serious about rehabilitation, even if they don't know they're serious yet, we put them in contact with these partners. They have certain benchmarks that they'll have to reach. So for some people, your first benchmark may just be getting stable housing. For other people, your first benchmark may be getting stabilized on your medication so that you are competent or that your attorney is able to engage with you at a more intimate level. For other people, maybe having a mentor. And so what we've seen is people actually having their lives change. We have three participants in our program now, and one of the participants had every week they have to come to court, engage with the court and the community agencies, and they'll have curriculum. And so a few weeks ago, one of the topics in our curriculum was about how you see yourself and the vision that you have for yourself in the future. And so they had to do vision boards. And one of our participants cut out a photo in a magazine, and it was a family with a white picket fence. And he later ended up talking about why he cut out that photo. And he said, when I was in custody, I was not able to see myself in this way with a family or somebody who could achieve anything. And he said, and this really stuck with me, is that I now have my ID. It was his ID. He said, I now have my ID. And that has just shown me that it is possible to live differently than how I've been living. And so it's those small things. It's just getting people connected with the right resources, that intimate court engagement that is really changing the trajectory of how people are responding to desperation. And so I feel very, very passionate about rehabilitation. I feel very passionate about people who are serious about rehabilitation because I think that's how we really address violent crime.
Yeah, and to that point, I think one thing you mentioned that really stood out to me is this idea of something as simple as an ID, right? These are things that we often take for granted. Last week, I spoke to a candidate, they're running for county judge, and she also talked about crime and crime prevention. And she said one of the things that she kept seeing happen was people that were simply stealing food, right?
Hmm.
Like this idea of stealing food. And so it's these things that we take truly for granted. And so one thing that I want to know is how do you lead a courtroom? Obviously with fairness, that's something that you have made, exceedingly clear that that is something that you're grounded in, but also while remaining compassionate and really cognizant of these, these outside, these external forces that are causing people to commit crime.
I think that you have to realize that justice is not black and white. There's not always going to be a solution that is readily apparent. Sometimes it means taking a deeper dive at a person's life. Um, for example, we had a case this week, and this person was charged with possession of child pornography. Now, on his face, it sounds horrible, but there was a allegation that he had violated his conditions of his bond, which just means that you receive bond conditions when you're placed on bond, and if you violate any of those conditions, then the court has the discretion to revoke your bond and remand you back into custody. One of the allegations was that the defendant had been viewing pornography. Now, obviously, that would be a violation. And so, what I asked someone in my court was just to give me the records, let me see what the messages said, because it was an allegation that he received a message. Now, when I actually reviewed it, what I saw was that these pictures were sent to this person unabated. There was a text thread, and the defendant was actually saying that, look, I'm focused on my sobriety. I really care about my mental space. I'm not concerned about anything physical. But if I would have taken action without first doing a deeper dive into the case, that would have been a situation where his bond would have been revoked and he would have been remanded into custody. So, what I've realized is that leading with compassion first starts with listening. It first starts with not being in a rush to make a decision. It starts with being very thoughtful about every decision and realizing that it's justice is not black and white. Maybe in some instances you say, okay, this is a person who probably needs incarceration. They need to be in a confined environment for a very long time. But those situations oftentimes require careful and thoughtful consideration. And I think that that has been echoed throughout the courtroom, and people know, okay, if she's saying that she needs to take some time to make this decision, she's actually really going to be thoughtful about this decision.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
So as we pivot a little bit, we talked about the fact that you're the youngest. We talked that you're about your being a woman of color. I want to know because obviously I'm a young woman. I'm also a woman of color. And I know that, especially in this space, I work in politics, there is immense pressure around that, right? And it comes from
Mhm.
all different sides. It comes from individuals that you're trying to mentor, you want to become and be a good role model. It comes from the individuals above you who are saying, you haven't paid your due. Now is not your time. For you, what pressure did you experience and continue or may continue to experience? And how do you navigate that?
Yeah. So when I was running, the pressure was that you have not paid your dues. The pressure was you were too young. And so I often found myself trying to overcompensate for that. I was trying to dress older. I was um to me not being authentic to the fact that I was young, because everyone around me in this space made it seem like it was a problem. And
Yeah.
so that's why I always say, even in mentoring other people, the reasons why people hate you or don't like you or think that you are not qualified will later on be the reasons why they think you are qualified, or be the reasons why people applaud your success. And so I don't think about my youth at any right now as a reason why I'm not qualified, or I don't feel any pressure from that, because I know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I know that I have the tools. The great thing about the law is that it's pretty consistent, and you can literally, it's about interpretation. And I can go into the penal code or look at case law and maybe have one interpretation, and another judge may have another. But I have those skills, I have those tools, and it doesn't intimidate me, because if I have gotten to this point at 30 years old, I don't know what my ceiling is. And so I've taken off the pressure, but I do believe that it is important to operate with a standard of excellence. Because I think as Black women and as young people, we lose credibility when we just say that people are doing this to us because we're Black, or people are doing this to us because we're women. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be excellent. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't operate with a standard of excellence. And so, and even going back to my students, that's the cadence that we operate in. It's like, no, if you don't have a suit on, your attendance is not counted.
Oh,
If you're not on time, your attendance is not counted because we operate in a standard of excellence. I don't want you to use the fact that you're Black and you're a woman as the reason why. Your standards should be excellent. And so I don't allow societal pressures. I did. I'm not going to say that didn't influence me, but I did at one point allow the fact that I was young to be the reason why I felt insecure about myself. But now I think it's so beautiful that young people are running for office. I'm just it makes me smile when I see young people who decide to run, because I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is for somebody to constantly tell you you're too young, you haven't paid your dues. Because I think we actually should be imparting all of that institutional knowledge that we do have from older generations onto our younger generations so that they do feel confident running. So the pressure is off, and now I feel inspired.
yeah, I love that. And for the people that are listening, for the audience, I don't know about y'all, but Judge Catherine made me sit up a little bit straighter. Okay. She said we are operating from a space of excellence, and I will definitely carry that with me for individuals who do not understand this term because we keep saying paid your due. Can you explain what that actually means to the individuals that
Yeah.
don't know?
Absolutely. So when I decided to run, I was so ignorant to politics. I because I don't consider myself a politician.
Yeah.
I just am someone who wanted to be a judge. And in Texas, in our district courts, we actually have to run for office. It's very different than other states. And so um me running felt weird because it's like you're partisan. You have to choose a party, but then you tell me that I'm supposed to get on the bench and be a neutral arbiter of the law and not favor one side versus the other. And so coming into the political space, I did not realize how far removed I was from it. Because I was not somebody who was really involved in politics in that way. I just knew I wanted to be a judge. And so when I got into the space, there were people who had been in the political space, and there are people who are really, really engaged in politics and who feel like if you have not been engaged in politics for a long period of time, if you have not paid your, when I say paid your dues, I mean, if you have not been a part of this system and people know who you are, then you aren't qualified to run. We should know who you are. We should know your name. Why don't we know you? Why haven't we seen you at these events? And that's the pressure you feel. You have not done enough. When we say paid your dues, you have not done enough to be qualified to run for this position. And so I quickly learned that there was a whole different world that I was not even privy to. And people let me know very quickly, like, who are you?
Yes, it will.
Where have you been? We haven't seen you. And I had to own that. I had to own that. I said, I hadn't been here because I was not privy to this space. I just want to be a judge. But I had to tell people why my life experiences were important and why having the lens of a young Black woman was going to be important on the bench. And people saw my passion, people saw my grit, and irrespective of who in the party had a particular feeling about it, I knew that there were people, we live in a county of 4 million, almost 5 million people, and that if somebody had a problem with me running because I was too young, there would be somebody else who would think that it was inspiring to run. And so I just shifted my energy towards people who were willing to listen, people who were willing to give me a chance. And there were so many people who thought, man, I'm so glad you're running. I'm so glad to see young people like you getting out there to run. And so, yeah, people may say you haven't paid your dues, but there may be other people who say, I'm so glad to see a new, fresh face. I'm so glad that you had the courage to put your name on the ballot.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to speak to that for a second. So I've been in this space for about 10 years now. My first ever campaign, I was 18 years old.
Wow.
And even still, at this age, I'm 28 now, there are people that are still telling me I haven't paid my dues, right?
Mhm.
And so I say that to say the people that are often telling you that they don't have a microscope into every single thing that you are doing on a daily basis either. So they may say, well, I haven't seen you at this event or that event, but they might have missed you at the last one or,
Right.
doing community service or whatever the case may be. So my thing is like I never want people to feel discouraged because of one person or because of one system, or they say, well, this person has been waiting. Well, why were they waiting? They should have taken a baton and they should have ran. That's what I'm doing.
Exactly.
So it's like really just honing in on when it's your time and when it's your purpose, that should be it, right? And so I love
Yeah.
that you spoke to that. And I also, speaking about pressure, we talked about external pressure. Is there ever any, internal pressure? You're a judge now, which is incredible. Is there ever any internal pressure for you to almost top yourself or to do the next big thing?
I don't feel pressure in that way. I
Yeah.
feel pressure to get it right.
Mm,
When I am faced with a difficult decision, sometimes I say, man, could somebody else make this decision? I find somebody else to do it. And the reason I say get it right is because you only have one time to get it right.
mm,
And it is oftentimes somebody's life. And so if I don't know, and I oftentimes am faced with these um, moments of kind of vacillating about what I should do when typically it's when somebody is young and you think about a lot of things because there's a lot of mitigation when you think about young people who have just entered into the real world and who don't have a lot of life experiences and who have the capacity to rehabilitate. But then you also think about sometimes the very serious nature of the offense. I mean, I've had people before me who were 17 years old charged with capital murder, and people who were 17 years old charged with murder when they were juvenile at 16 and then come to my court and charged with capital murder at 17 because you're 17 when you're an adult. And so when I'm faced with those difficult decisions, that is when I feel the pressure because this is somebody's life at stake. It's lives on both ends. It's somebody's life who will have to maybe spend time in prison, and then it's a victim who may have lost a loved one who is, or somebody who maybe has a debilitating injury and they could never walk again. And so you think about those decisions and you want to always be fair, but you know that everybody is not going to be okay with the decision you make. And so those are the internal pressures. I have a lot of peace about what's next for me. Because God has already blown my mind with where I'm at. And so I don't feel pressure to get anywhere or achievement. I know something great for me is I just know it because I did not expect this for my life at this age. And so I just can't imagine where I'm going. I know that this is my floor in the sense that I have learned a lot, but I know that there is capacity for me to achieve more. But the internal pressures lie in the decisions that I make on a day-to-day basis.
yeah, that's so exciting though. I think what a way to just have peace. I think I'm one of those people, I'm always thinking about what's next and like, how do
Mhm.
I top myself and like, what else am I going to accomplish? Almost to a fault, right? Like sometimes I don't necessarily sit in the current wins because I'm so focused on what's coming next. So I love that you spoke to that, like having peace about whatever's to come, right? You know it's a God thing, you know it's going to be good and it's going to be for your good. So I love
That's
that.
right.
So as we get to the end and we begin to close, if you ladies have any questions, I hope you'll drop them in the chat below because we will go into a brief Q&A. But I want to skip into a lightning round because I'm just curious. I'm a little nosy. I like to know things. First thing you do when you walk into your courtroom, tell us about it.
Pray.
Pray.
I pray
Yeah,
right before I walk into the courtroom. I ask God to give me compassion and wisdom and insight to make hard decisions and to always be a vessel for his use.
I love that. One word, I feel like I know already, but one word that defines your leadership style.
Servant.
Ooh, okay, that's good. I like that. I love that. Okay, this is a little bit of a hard one. Spelman or Howard? Which one shaped you
Spelman.
more? Ooh,
Didn't even have to
uh-oh,
finish.
uh-oh. Right now.
I know the Howard people are gonna come
Mm,
after me.
hold on
Spelman,
now.
absolutely. Spelman, absolutely, hands down.
Okay, that was real quick. I don't know about that one. The hardest part about becoming a judge at 30.
I think that when I first took the bench, I was so intimidated by my colleagues because these were people I practiced in front of. And when I got to our first meeting, because we have meetings amongst each other, we're on different committees, and it kind of reminded me of Michelle Obama when she said, when I got into this room and I realized that nobody is really smart. And
Good.
and everyone is just doing their best.
Mm,
And I felt a little bit of imposter syndrome when I walked into the room because I'm like, I am young, I've practiced in front of these people, I'm nervous, but I found myself thinking, I'm gonna be just fine.
yeah, that's good. That's
Mhm.
good. I always say if I'm in the room, I'm meant to be there, so I'll take
That's
it.
right.
Okay, a misconception that people might have about young judges.
I don't know any other young judges, but I think a
You're cute.
misconception.
Period.
I think a misconception that people might have about me is that I'm also not human, and that we don't can't empathize or sympathize with other people's lived experiences. There are some experiences I can't understand, but
Mm,
I'm always willing to listen. I don't have children. I don't know what that is like to be a parent. And so, but I'm always willing to listen to understand. And so I think the misconception is that judges kind of sit on this throne and we don't understand the day to day of what most of the people who are in our courtrooms face. And maybe we don't, but I always want to be sure to listen to understand.
I love that. So we talked a lot about your work in the courtroom. We talked about your work in the classroom. What keeps you grounded outside of the two?
My family and friends. I have a very robust social life, and that has really kept me grounded. When I am with my family and friends, I do not discuss work. I don't want to talk about it. And when I say robust social life, I like to travel. I like to go to different experiences. I just like being in spaces where it feels very authentic. And I told my family and friends, like, if I ever get black robe syndrome, which is like when judges take the bench and they forget who they are, I told them to please slap me because I don't ever want to be in a place where I think that I'm better than anybody because we are all one step bad decision away from being in jail. Really, that's just the reality of it. Because one allegation could land you in a criminal court, and so um, I am so blessed to be around people, and I have friends from Spelman who know me, friends from high school, friends from law school, and I'm just a very, very low maintenance kind of person. And so like when like that's why you see on my Zoom, my name is not Judge Katherine Thomas, it's just Katherine Thomas because but some of my friends, they'll even have to watch themselves when they walk in the room and they're like, Cat, because that's what everyone calls me, because that's who I am. Yes, I am a judge. That is my profession, but I am also Catherine. And so being around people who keep it 100 with me, who are down to have a good time, who want to sometimes watch trash television, all of those things are important to me because it keeps me out of this. What we hear every day is so heavy. And so when I get home, I want to be able to really just like be a human again and just take away everything that I've just heard and just relax in me.
Yeah, yeah. And we all need that. We all need people that are
Hmm.
going to keep us grounded. And I will say, the first time we ever met, the way you introduced yourself was literally as Catherine. And I was like,
Hmm.
and I was like, I don't feel too comfortable with that. I was like, I was like, thank you, but no, I don't know about that. So we do have some questions in the chat. I want to run through them quickly. Daniel Scott wants to know, when are you up to run again? I know the answer, but if you want to share.
I'm on the ballot in November. I need y'all's support, please. Make sure you go vote on November 3rd. Tell your friends, your family. Harris County has the longest ballot in the nation. My race was on page 41 in the primary. So you got to go all the way down the ballot to find my name. Thank you.
Absolutely. They want to know, are there any volunteering opportunities for your youth program, or are there any ways to help slash assist?
Yeah, there are. I'm going to put my work email in the chat. There are some ways to assist. We have a calendar right now of our curriculum. And so we teach on different topics. So we're always interested in people who are experts at certain topics. Yeah, last week we talked, well, yesterday, yeah, we talked about developing those soft skills in the workplace, showing up to work on time, perfecting your resume. And so always looking for people who are willing to engage and interact with our participants.
That came from Tyra. Ayana wants to know and this is a great question, what are some micro steps a person can take to establish a personal standard of excellence?
I love that
That's a
question. I
great
love
question.
that question. Micro steps, man, that's great. I think it first starts, and people may disagree with this. Um, it first starts off with how you carry yourself and your appearance. The reality is people judge you based off of how you look. And if we want to present ourselves in a way that is confident, our hair is together, our makeup is together, we know what we're talking about, we walk into a space, we read books, that also helps too. Um, we can articulate ourselves. We are intentional about just being cultured, we travel. I think all of those things help make us more well-rounded individuals. And those are the things that I kind of carry in my professional and sense of professionalism too, because when I'm on the bench and I think about other people, I'm thinking about all of the lived experiences that I have, but also things that I've seen. And so showing up, dress the part, on time, mindful of what you say are all small steps to get you to where you want to be.
I love that. I love that. Okay, the next question says, what is your next step? And you talked about this a little bit after being district judge. Would you ever venture to federal court?
I would. I've been having some conversations about that.
Uh,
Yep,
okay,
yep,
y'all heard it here first. Y'all heard it here.
yep. We've been having some conversations about that.
Ooh, that's awesome. That's so exciting. Okay, so we'll have you back when you're a federal judge.
I love that.
Period. So someone said, I really appreciated what you said about professionalism in the courtroom. I'm curious though, how do you think personal style fits into that? I think a lot of us grew up inspired by things like Legally Blonde or attorneys who still embrace their personal style, especially wearing pink in court. Do you think there's room for that, or do you feel it can affect how seriously someone is taken?
I think there's room for it. I think if it is done tastefully, there's absolutely room for it. I have a pink suit with feathers on the sleeves and on the bottom of the pants. I think that there's room. Anything that is done tastefully, I think there's absolutely room for it. And I think people appreciate you bringing your own style and uniqueness into the courtroom. I mean, for the most part, the courtroom was dominated by white males for a very long time. And it wasn't until really 2018 where we saw, or 2019, where we saw 18 Black women take the bench. And it was the first time that I had ever seen somebody who had colored nails or somebody who had a sew in. And all of it looked great. All of it, there was nothing that was unprofessional about it. So I think even being mindful of how we carry ourselves is super important, but I don't think that you let other people's expectation of what style is or what looks appropriate define how you present your uniqueness and your style into the courtroom.
Yes, that's beautiful because we all know Legally Blonde, right? We all know the pink suit. We all know the color and just what it means to
Wear it.
first. I love that. Yes.
Wear the pink suit, wear the red suit. I pride I love fashion. I love as my friends say, putting that SHIT
I was
on.
just about to say.
Uh, I love to put it on,
Hmm.
and I'm going to.
Yes.
Under that robe, you'll see a full pink suit. You'll see a red suit. You may even see a crop top one day. But you know what? That crop top is going to be covered up with the jacket.
No, look, I saw your recent headshots and all of the outfits. I was like, these are tea. Like we think of judges, and sometimes we think of stuffy or just gray suits or
Mhm.
black suits, or you have to wear the navy suit. I saw those outfits. I was like, that's what I'm talking about. I would
Yeah.
feel real comfortable knowing I got a judge with some style. Okay. The last question is from Tyra. She says, "Are there any things you wish you did in law school? Any missed opportunities?"
I probably would have taken advantage of more externships while I was a student, excuse me, during the semester. So I had internships during the summer, but I think being in DC is just such an invaluable experience because you're right there with all of the government agencies and so I would have probably had more externship experiences. I think that would have only created more opportunities for me to learn what I like, what I don't like. That's the great thing about internships.
Yeah, that's awesome. We also have Danielle Scott. She is the founder of the Spell House Pack. She did drop some information, so I'll pass that along to the judge after we conclude. With that being said, we are coming to a close. Judge Catherine, is there anything else you'd like to let these ladies know before we close?
There is a scripture I want to leave you all with, and it says it's from First Timothy 4 and 12, and it says, "Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." And when I heard that scripture, what it told me was that just because other people have a problem with your youth does not mean you're not exactly where you're supposed to be. God is giving you everything you need to be exactly where you are. I hope that my life story has encouraged people to go after everything you want to do. Um, it's so funny because today I was in a jury trial and one of the lawyers said something, and it's kind of sometimes some of the snarky remarks, like when we talk about being a black woman, and he said, "Man, I was so impressed with your it's called voir dire presentations, just like your presentation in front of the prospective jury." And I knew that he was saying it in a way where he thought that he it was shocked that I was prepared, that I knew the law, that I had a command of the law. And it's oftentimes funny because I think about how people perceive me, oftentimes thinking I'm not qualified, but you are. And your youth is not a reason why you are not qualified. And so I hope that my story inspired someone, inspired multiple people, and I hope to see everybody on this Zoom go after exactly what they want to do.
Yes, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Judge Catherine. This was incredible. Before we close, I just want to say just how grateful I am that you took time out of what I'm sure is a busy night to be here and to chat with us. Obviously, you are in the midst of running your reelection campaign, so I'm sure there's so many other things you could have been doing. So to take your time, and just share with us was incredible.